Welcome to the Polar Steam Cool Connections live stream. While we are waiting for folks to join, please post in the chat where you are watching from, and if others are joining you, like a classroom, we'd love to know how many people are watching from your location. As you add that information to the chat, we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm Jamie Ivory, the logistics coordinator for the Polar Steam program, and we are excited to have you with us today. Polar STEAM is an NSF, is a U.S. NSF funded program based at Oregon State University that facilitates virtual and field-based collaborations between polar researchers, educators, and artists to enhance science communication, bringing polar science to everyone. A recording of this live stream will be posted on our YouTube channel. We will keep the focus of today's event on this team's story and experiences digging through time in Alaska. However, I will mention that the 2026-27 Antarctic Artists and Writers Fellowship process is progressing for the upcoming season, and we look forward to sharing those updates on placements very soon. Applications for the Polar STEAM Antarctic Artists and Writers Program and Educator Program for 2027-28 are open. If you have questions about our artist, educator, or researcher programs, please refer to the information on our website. And attention to researchers, we are currently recruiting NSF-funded polar researchers for the 2027 collaborations. We're also excited to share and invite you to come join us at the Polar STEAM Summit, where polar science, art, and education intersect and curiosity comes to life. This is an in-person event which will be held in Corvallis, Oregon, October 1 through 3rd. Please join us to strengthen your broader impacts and science communication skills, share your work in creative and engaging ways, and to build meaningful networks. Now, today, we are excited to connect with two of our Polar STEAM fellows, Bree Doering and Tom Turner, working at an archaeological site at Shaw Creek. We will start with a presentation from the fellows and follow that with questions from all of you, our viewers. You can submit your questions in the live chat, and our team will monitor and ask those questions that are submitted there and that were submitted ahead of time at the end of the presentation. Let's see. And Bree, I'd like to introduce our fellows. Bree Doering is an assistant professor of archaeology at University of Wyoming. Her primary focus is on the traditional foodways of Alaska natives in the interior, particularly focusing on the history of fishing. And Tom Turner is a lens-based artist and educator based in Anchorage, Alaska. He teaches photography, digital art, and journalism at Bartlett High School, where he also advises the yearbook and emphasizes visual storytelling as a form of inquiry. Bree, Tom, welcome. Now I'll turn it over to you all at the field site to share about the things you've been finding on your dig.
Yeah, hi. So the first thing we'd just like to share was just a quick introduction, and that we have a little video, 30-second video. So you'll see our site is on top of this little mound. Where we're digging is that little triangular shaped tarp that sort of keeps the sun off and the rain off of us.
And
Go ahead.
you can see the Alaska Range in the distance there, looking south.
Yeah, so we're here sort of investigating. Let's go to the next slide if you don't mind. Yeah, we're here investigating ancient peoples who used this as a campsite, multiple locations, multiple times. Bree, you're saying that this has been used on and off for 14,000 years by people as they pass this area.
Yeah.
So can you give us a quick intro to where we are?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, welcome everyone. First I want to say a big masicho anabasi to everyone watching and also all of the folks back at home who are helping us to be here by watching our cats, our toddlers, our salamander, and just we welcome everyone to this site. This is Swan Point. We're really grateful to be here through the collaborative efforts of many different people. Swan Point is among the oldest sites in the Americas. The site was originally found in 1990 when they dug a hole and found mammoth ivory at the bottom of it. Really cool stuff. So we came back here after several decades of research because most of the work at the site had focused on a relatively small area until they dug just a test to look at the geology, and they found a hearth cooking feature at the bottom of it really far away from where they thought there was any other archaeology. So we came back in 2024 and we did a number of auger tests to essentially try to see where there might be other activities at the site. As Jamie said, my research is really focused on what people were eating here in the past and the history of cooking through time. I'm really interested in how fishing and birding especially played roles and how people lived in this really immeasurably beautiful but also difficult environment. So we did these auger probes, and the idea here, which you can see in the map in the bottom corner, is that we can actually predict where we're going to find the most artifacts. And usually where you find the most artifacts, there's a hearth cooking feature in the middle. These are called hearth-centered activity areas. And it's just like your kitchen where you have all the tools and the people, conversation, and people have been making these important hearth cooking features for millennia at this site. So it's really cool to be here.
Yeah, sometimes we'll find artifacts, not find, we'll
Identify.
identify artifacts
Yeah.
on top, like the first thing we found, which we'll show you in a little bit, or we'll dig down, 40 or 80 centimeters, even maybe
Mhm.
at 60 centimeters, I guess, and find a hearth from 14,000 years ago.
Yeah.
So it's quite amazing. Like one of the things that Bree has been telling me about is how the landscape has changed over those centuries.
Mhm.
14,000 years ago, we didn't have trees here, which was a kind of a really bizarre idea for me. It's
Yeah.
been hard to get my head around it.
Yeah, and it's actually since I started working here in 2019, a big fire came through the area, so you can see that all the trees around us are burned. And this actually allows us to really picture what the landscape would have looked like 14,000 years ago when the landscape was covered with tall grasses instead of these big, beautiful spruce and birch forests that we see in the interior today.
Yeah. And so in the bottom right slide, that's Alex and Hannah doing an auger test.
Hmm.
It's basically just a circular pipe with a bit on one side that pulls it up like an ice core.
It's a really low tech tool that surprisingly people haven't used very much until quite recently. This is a technique I borrowed from my colleagues at the University of Wyoming who are also really interested in these early periods of American history. And it's excellent for quickly understanding how artifacts are distributed across a large landform like the one we're sitting on today.
Yeah. Let's go to the next slide. So once you identify where, what you get or where these augers take place, then it's time to start figuring out where you want to dig and what how far you want to go down. One of the things that you can discover from those cores is where artifacts might be discovered or rediscovered. And so then that allows you to identify what depth we're going to. Our depth goal is 65 centimeters
Yeah.
at
So
this site.
yeah, we're hoping to get down to 65 centimeters because based on our auger probes, that's about where we stop identifying those artifacts. Mhm.
Yeah, and so that gives us a lot of predictive data so that we know where to dig. They dig perfectly square holes, and it is quite amazing to watch. The squareness of these holes is beautiful. As you can see here, they gridded out 1 meter hole or 1 meter square, and then even inside of that, they grid another quad. So
Mhm.
you have a northwest, northeast, southeast, southwest uh, square that they then dig, and they take each quad at a time, scraping ever so lightly across so they can feel those artifacts emerge
Mhm.
from the earth. And then any dirt is screened. You see Bree here screening on the bottom right photo. It's screened through a eight, what is it?
1/8 inch.
Eighth inch screen mesh. And so any small little bits, they can be found and discovered,
Mhm.
rediscovered.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. So we do everything we can to keep an idea of where things are coming from because then we can put those back into our predictive models and test how well they're actually working for us.
And to some extent, we were talking about this earlier, it's about sort of like understanding the preponderance of the data, like having a really good understanding of that there's a lot of activity
Hmm.
in this area. It doesn't necessarily matter that you need to find the big thing. It's more about finding that
Hmm.
that this is where people lived and did their work. And then
Hmm.
of course finding the hearth. We haven't really talked about the
Hmm.
pollens and
And
micro
the macro botanicals.
botanicals. Yes.
So you might be wondering, like, why do we care so much about cooking? What's that all about? One of the limitations we face here in central Alaska is that animal bones in particular don't preserve very well. The sediments are kind of acidic, they're also quite wet, and when you have these big beautiful forests, the roots just kind of turn everything up. So normally when people are studying diet, what people were cooking and eating in the past, archaeologists will focus on animal bones because that's a really good record of what people were chowing down on. But when your bones look like cheese, like they do at this site, you have to use other tools. And now we have a lot of geochemistry tools that we borrow and collaborate with geochemists to better understand the residues of foods that people were eating. So the cooking features not only provide those sort of like fats that I can use to identify fish in the archaeological record and birds, but they also contain tiny seeds, tiny pieces of charcoal. Plants are another thing that are really under discussed. We don't talk about them very much when we're doing archaeology in places in the far north and polar regions because we're always focused on, oh, hunting mammoth, hunting bison, hunting caribou. But plants are very important, not just for as a food source, but to people's identities here in polar regions today. I know I have some of my most cherished memories going out berry picking with my family and my friends, and that's something that's been a tradition for a very long time in places like this.
And you were saying yesterday that the first berries sort of came into the record, the archaeological record around what was it, 11,000 years ago. And I find that like truly interesting that they've been around for 11,000 years.
Yeah, a lot of the berries, like blueberries and bilberries that we pick in the interior today, they needed more moisture than they had at the end of the Pleistocene. So we don't see those berries until a little bit later on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Next slide. So we had a friend who was here on the very first day. This is a on the right there. That's an owl, like a little bitty northern hawk owl, perched. It's a baby owl perched in a burned out tree. Beautiful owl. The parents were not happy we were around.
No. We think that the little baby got moved the following day. The owls joined us every morning and every afternoon. We could hear them screeching in the trees. It was really cool.
Yeah. And then one of the things that I really enjoyed seeing was the different coloration of dirt as they pulled it out of those auger tests, and it was a beautiful shot. So I thought I'd share it here. Um,
Yeah,
I think
you can really see like what we're looking at through time, and this is a great illustration of how you can see those forests coming in because it gets darker, and that's where you get those forest soils. And you can see on the far left-hand side of that image, it's mostly just sort of dry sand with a couple of things in there. That's how we know that there were no big trees on the landscape because there's none of that dark, rich forest soil. So that's a nice illustration.
yeah, and Bree, you really painted a picture for me when I first started talking to you about all this. You know, at this site, particular to the south, there were glaciers. To the north, there were glaciers. This strip, this sort of corridor, leading into the Tanana, uh, was open and grassy, but there was a lot of sand and sediment blowing around as well. And so it's a really silty, fine soil,
Hmm.
fine grained soil. It's really interesting to know that part of the geology. And I know that that's not your field, but it's still like
Yeah.
still very interesting.
Yeah, we dabble, right? Yeah, it would have, we know based on these sediments, like you see at the very bottom of these archaeological sites, there's actually really nothing on the ground because it was so windy that not even sand would collect on these landforms. We also find these really smooth polished rocks, which are called ventifacts, and they are little wind polished artifacts. And we know it just must have been churning wind all the time. And this part of Alaska is pretty windy in general, so it's really hard to imagine how it could have been even windier in the past.
Yeah.
We had probably 50-mile-an-hour winds the other day, even still. So it really had to kind of calm down in order for us to get the sediments, which preserve the archaeological materials that we're excavating today. And yeah, just like you're saying, Tom, it's really cool to imagine how this would have been kind of a glacier-locked landscape where people could have used the streams that were passing through as corridors for getting around this area, which would have looked a lot like a savanna.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, very cool. Okay, so that's the end of our little slide presentation. Let's take some questions.
Oh, great. Thank you guys. This was amazing. Tom, I love the photographs. It was really informative in a beautiful way. Okay, yes, let's take some questions. Just a reminder to folks that if you have questions, please put them in the chat and we will go ahead and ask Bree and Tom your question. Let's see, we can start with Bree, you had mentioned using these newer techniques that are kind of required at this site so that you can see what people were eating in the past. Was there anything that surprised you about a past diet from using this technique?
That's a really nice question. Here in the interior today, we think a lot about the different animals that are on the landscape and how they're prepared in traditional ways that we enjoy, like smoked salmon. I enjoy a good moose burger, things like that. And looking back into what archaeologists had reconstructed in the past, one of the things that had always surprised me was that there was really very little fish and very little salmon in the record. We know now within the last 10 years, there was an archaeological site that's been identified and thoroughly researched that shows people were fishing for salmon at least 11,500 years ago. So time immemorial, basically. And I was just talking to a colleague yesterday about how the more we look for fish, the more we find it everywhere. And it shouldn't really be that surprising because of how important fish are to the interior people today. But it is something that, like, as an archaeologist looking at what people have written, you don't expect to find it very much. And in fact, we see it all the time. So that's a really revealing thing that that new technique has allowed us to see.
Awesome. Thank you. Let's see here. Uh, Thinking about the dig that you're currently on, what has surprised you what has been like the most unexpected thing you've found so far on this dig? And I'd love to hear from Bree and then also from Tom.
Sure.
Yeah, so I guess what first comes to mind just for this particular project, this is our ninth day out here, so we haven't been out here for particularly long. We opened an excavation unit, one of those little squares that we showed in the previous slides. And in the first hour, I think, we pulled out a beautiful, we call it a projectile point base, but it's basically like the end of a projectile point. So you can see that kind of triangular shape, and it's kind of missing the tip. But that's something that, like, it can be a once in a a season, if not once in every few years, kind of a find, or a thing that we'll recover. And then a couple of trowel scrapes later, we found the tip.
Whoa.
So, and that was a really cool way to start that excavation unit. So I was really quite pleasantly surprised. And we have these predictive maps that I put in, and it's always a surprise to see when they work and you actually find or are able to like put together a lot of really cool things. So it's not all about projectile points all the time. That's just one piece of the larger puzzle, but it sure does feel good when you find a tool.
Yeah, it does. And even identifying just like the little bitty flakes has been surprising to me. Like the accuracy that you're bringing to the discovery process. from my perspective, and I've been learning this quite a bit. Uh, I spend a lot of time with the screen, screening those little flakes out. Um, and it's interesting, like the preponderance of data. Um, and so that's I think gonna influence something. I don't know. Is it rattles around in there?
Yeah, we are collecting a lot of data right now, which is pretty it's a little time consuming and like writing, all these things, but it comes back in spades when you're in the lab.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And when you find something like what you showed us, is there a dance that everyone does? Is there like
Is,
Definitely some high fives and like, yeah, for sure.
nice.
Yeah.
All right. So thinking about this one's for Tom. Since you are also an Alaskan, how has working with Bree changed your ideas or understanding of Native people in Alaska?
ah, so that is a good question. I think that I think my first response is that it's more changed the idea of how they lived on the land. Um, it's made me rethink what their diets were, what their daily life was like. Um, I think I'm making some assumptions here, and that's fine for an artist to do, but I'm making some assumptions about like how they built community around these
Mm,
hearths. Um, but and I think that we all live around the fire in
mhm,
some way, and fire has always been an important component uh, of community. And I feel like I'm understanding how they lived on the land and how that community would come together and teach how to knap flint or teach how uh, to live on this landscape. That's been, I think, the most change about how I understand the native Alaska population.
I
Mm,
just want to pull on that thread a little bit, Tom, because one of the things we've been talking about a lot this session, Hannah, who's standing behind us at the total station right now, just finished her master's thesis on sort of collecting data on children and what children are doing at different in different tribes across North America in contemporary settings. So we can use that to kind of see what kids are doing in larger communities in the past. And so we've been talking a lot about like, okay, what would it look like if somebody was learning how to do this, learning how to flint nap? And I really like that you highlighted that when we picture the hearth, we picture people like a lot of people sitting around a hearth.
Yeah.
And that's the difference between, an archaeologist who's really focused on finding a hunting tool and an archaeological project like this that's really interested in what the community is cooking and what everybody is doing. And I like that you're seeing those different people represented in the past in your mind's eye. It's
Yeah,
really nice.
definitely. And I'm also seeing them walk on the land. Like as
Mhm.
like we have a half hour, 45-minute walk in and out every day through a swampy bog, which would not have been here 14,000 years ago, but I'm still picturing moving as a community, moving as a group, moving
Mhm.
with the land as we're walking in and out of the site. And we've had lots of conversations about how we would spot the next campsite and how we would go to that next campsite and things like that. When we went up to another site that was also excavated a few years back,
Mhm.
and saw that, and it's within sight of this
Mhm.
particular place. And so we're sort of picking high points on the land,
Mhm.
and saying that's our next spot. And so then we walk over there and then we pick the next spot. Well, okay, that's how we move. It's just really changed how I think about native movement on the
Mhm.
land, about a nomadic idea.
mm, yeah. And I never really thought about depending on what your focus was in dig sites, how your view or honing in on the members of the community might change. And so that was really, really neat to hear. Thank you for sharing that. So since you mentioned your ma just defended master student in the back, congrats. Um, yeah, we got a question that came in wondering what's going on behind you. There looks like there's
Yeah.
a lot of fun stuff happening back there.
Yeah, so Hannah is standing at the total station. The total station is basically a laser on a tripod. And then in the excavation block, which is basically right there, somebody holds a stick up with a mirror, and essentially the computer tracks the time between when the laser hits the mirror and when it returns to the total station. And that allows us to get a sub-centimeter resolution. So within a centimeter, which is quite small, understanding of where different artifacts are at within these different surfaces that we're excavating. Yeah. And so other things that are happening behind us are those square holes. We're digging those. There's a screen back there, a screening station over a tarp. We're recording. Let's see. We're lighting mosquito coils. All of those things are happening back there. Yeah.
So you mentioned the mosquito coils. Are mosquitoes bad in the area? Are they very prevalent?
Well, it is the state bird of Alaska. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are a lot of mosquitoes. I think I'm drenched in off.
Yeah. Especially when a cloud comes out, you can tell the temperature drops and all the mosquitoes sort of come out and start checking in on you.
So you use like bug repellent and then coils. Are there other techniques that you have for keeping them at bay while you're working in the field?
I usually just put my buff over my ears because if you can't hear them, then it's like 50% of the battle.
And also, you just get used to it. You just get used to it.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. Um, I was gonna comment that I just loved the idea when you were talking about behind you, talking about this really impressive cutting edge technology that's giving you readings to, a centimeter, but the history and working to look in the past and that bringing together of like history and cutting edge science is just a really wonderful moment to be sitting in and seeing and being a part of.
Yeah, that's one of the things that really attracted me to this discipline because you can take so many different techniques from lab techniques from different scientific methods and then use them in service of telling these stories about community, working with community to learn about what's important. One of the reasons why I'm taking part in this particular research project is because in the interior we're seeing far decreased salmon runs, and a lot of communities that rely on subsistence fishing in the interior haven't been able to basically fish the traditional way because there's so few salmon coming into the interior. And so a big part of this research is to contextualize how common that might have been in the past. And we can only do that if we use these like high-tech chemistry techniques essentially.
Yeah, great. Um, okay, so I wanted to ask something that's really unique with your dig, additionally, is that you have a Polar Steam Fellow with you, and so I'd love to hear is having a collaboration that's outside of your discipline for you, Bree. That's having a lens-based artist educator for you, Tom. That means working alongside an archaeologist. Is that impacting this experience? And if so, can you share some examples?
You want to go ahead or want me?
Go for it.
Okay. So my first response to this is we make art by living in the world by doing something, and then it filters through the artist, and then we make the work, right? It's a call and response type situation. We have to experience it, and then we filter it, and then we make the work. And then beyond that, it's going to be an experience of living with the work and understanding what's good and what's bad, and then remaking the work. um, and so part of what's really important for me about this, and similar to education, is uh, I need to go out and experience these things, experience Alaska, experience the ideas that are foreign to me before I can actually make work that's impactful, make work that has meaning, that has a connection to reality, and not just some crazy theory or idea that I popped into my head. And so this is important for me to see how not just native people lived on the land, but to see how contemporary people live on the land. And to get away from my own assumptions. I think that we all live in a sort of a tight silo of assumptions.
Mm-hmm.
And so, getting out and meeting people who are doing cool things. That's always so important to an artist. So
Mm.
Yeah, and I think similarly for me, one of the really valuable things about having Tom here, who's such a has such a keen eye, a media expert in so many ways, and just a wonderful artist on top of all of that, is that he can see through all of the things that I see. What seems like it's most poignant, most important, really translates in a way that I could share with other people because we get in these like metaphorical research holes where we're just sort of we can't see the weeds from the roots and you can't know what other people might think is cool or important about what you're doing even though you think it's cool enough to spend like a decade getting a doctoral degree over and it's been really helpful to me to see the especially the visual things that Tom identifies as like wow that's really interesting, that's really cool, let's talk about this some more. But Tom's not just a lens artist, he's also an educator. And I think that I've always really valued working with educators because you provide such a healthy perspective on how we could be transforming people's learning experiences and not just like how I translate this into a public sphere, which is also really important, but also how we can teach people how to do this work in a way that is I don't know, thoughtful, and really, I don't know, benefits everybody in that way.
yeah,
So
and it's also important, I think, for educators to go out and learn something new every once in a while and become a learner again. Like it's a
Mm.
humble experience to not get it the first time.
yeah.
Like, oh, what you I didn't automatically just become an expert? That's crazy. And
Yeah.
so it gives a bit of humble pie to you. Yeah.
I love that, the reminder of coming back and being a learner again. Yeah, and having that perspective, pretty sharp reminder of that perspective. Um, so Tom, as an art educator, how do you envision bringing Bree's science back to the classroom and how might that influence or impact your learners?
So I have all of this documentary video footage that I've been shooting. One of the things that I'm planning on doing is I'm going to have my students edit this documentary, probably short form documentary. We're going to talk about storytelling with that. It's good footage to do that with. I'm also planning on a, I think at this point, a collaborative piece with my photo two students that could be quite large and have a lot of layers. I'm thinking of layers and layers and layers of of all of the artifacts that we found. One of the things that you'd mentioned even before we came out was Bree 3D scans all of the work or all of the artifacts that have been identified, and so then we can 3D print all of those little artifacts and use those uh, to sort of place in space. And so uh, lots of ideas there. Nothing firm on that side, but I think that there's a lot of stuff rattling around. So
I think another aspect of having Tom here that's really cool is that, the way that artists approach a project and the way that scientific researchers approach a project it has a lot of parallels, but not a lot of convergence, but it's cool to hear how those processes unfold in our minds, and, like, Tom needs to kind of what I would say is sit with the data, and, like, kinda see what it tells you, and that's parallel to some of the things that we do in between the summers when we're back on our computers, so
yeah.
that's a helpful framing for me too.
Yeah, and I think that was one of our first conversations that we had was like, what's the scientific process versus the artistic process, and where do they line up, and where do they diverge?
Mm. Yeah, that's great. And I love, Tom, how you're kind of describing what sounds to me like a collaborative projects with the students coming out of this instead of you creating a presentation kind of situation, but bringing in the students a little bit in this collaboration by having a kind of class-based project sounds really um, amazing for a student to experience.
Yeah.
One question came in, and we're wondering, are you working at different sites within this location? Or is it just kind of one site is quite rich and takes a lot of time, and so you're focused on one site within the location?
Yeah, typically in most contexts, archaeologists will work on a site, and you will spend a number of summers excavating, focusing on data collection, making sense of the data, then going back, gathering more data. One of the approaches that I try to pursue with my research is sort of diversifying what we know about particular places on the landscape. So we're actually going to close up site tomorrow, and then we're going to move on to another site that's about maybe 10 miles away from us on a lake. So that site has a different ecological setting, which means different access to different resources. We see a lot more evidence of people birding at that site because it would have been a wet, marshy area, probably even during the last ice age 15,000 years ago. So we'll work on that site for another 10 days. And then finally, we're going to work on another site that's right next to a creek. So again, different kind of environment, different sorts of resources. People use that site repeatedly, but in different ways in the past. So that kind of helps to fill in some of the gaps that we have in Alaskan archaeology. And I think for me as a researcher, it really helps me to broaden my horizons and my own expectations about what we might find in different places and how much the local environment really determines what people are doing in different places as well. So, yeah, that's a really good question. And most archaeologists kind of try to focus on one thing, which is great, but a lot of these sites have been excavated and investigated by different people, and so kind of trying to broaden that picture a little bit with by excavating in slightly different areas helps to tell us I think a richer picture of what the whole site is here to tell us.
Hmm. And this brought up a question. You mentioned like people, a lot of different archaeological action has occurred at this site that you're currently at. When you leave a site, um, how do you leave it? Because I imagine, I mean, can you put the dirt layers roughly back? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, so archaeology is really unique. Unlike a lab where you can conduct an experiment, you can talk about how you conducted it, and then presumably somebody else could follow your recipe and do the same thing. Our data is gone. Once you excavate it, the site has been destroyed. So, and I don't say that lightly. That's why we take so many notes. That's why we document everything, because you're essentially disturbing all of the material, and it's never going to come back the way that it initially was put down. But we will fill in all the holes so that the walls, the perfectly straight walls that we make aren't going to cave in. We're not going to make a baby moose trap, things like this. So we fill in everything. We fill in all those auger holes that are out in the field. We do a really thorough micro trash pickup. And we just basically leave with a word of gratitude and we take off.
Wow, okay. And then how do you communicate that like this spot has been excavated so that like somebody else doesn't start
Does it
working there?
Another good question. Yeah, so this is all pertains to the way that sites are recorded in the United States. Each state has its own state historic preservation office, which is in charge of keeping records of every archaeological project that takes place in the state. The state of Alaska, which owns the land that we're currently excavating, requires me to report to them what we did this summer, where we dug, what kinds of artifacts were identified, where they're being stored. So that kind of receipt of all of our work is on file with the state in a digital database, so that people who are interested in doing research in this area in the future, they would be required to contact the state anyway, and then they would be required to talk about how their work would basically be looked at in terms of previous work. So yeah.
And also there's an ownership of the artifacts as well. The
Yeah.
state now owns the artifacts or
Mhm.
continues to own the artifacts.
Exactly. So because it's on state land, all those artifacts are technically property of the state and they will be curated at the Alaska Museum of the North. And that's all the conditions of the permit that I hold to do these excavations.
Okay, great. Do you
Yeah.
have artifacts at that museum currently?
Yeah,
Like that
there are
you
lots of artifacts on the site at the museum. Yeah.
Oh,
lots.
cool. That you've collected and can walk in and
Yeah, exactly.
wow. And so Tom, do you live near that museum?
So it's in Fairbanks. I live in closer to
Okay,
Anchorage.
got it.
Yeah, so it's about 8 hours.
Yeah,
Depends on the
yeah, not that
no,
close.
Yeah.
no.
Hmm.
But I could envision a cool family trip in the future where you can go and
I
see,
found
Yeah.
yes,
Neat.
recognize something you helped find.
But
Um,
Jamie, I just want to pick up on the 3D printing. That's one of the reasons why we do that, because a lot of times people picture these artifacts and they're just like buried in a museum basement, and they want to see them, they want to interact with them, and 3D printing is a really, really cool tool to do that. So
Yeah,
yeah.
my nephew just got a 3D printer and has been printing while we've been gone, we've been here, printing stuff for the whole family. Like so it's something that a fifth grader can do,
Mm-hmm.
and pick up. So
Yeah.
oh, that's great. Very cool. Well, we are just about at time. Thank you so much for joining us, Bree and Tom, while you are in the field, while things are happening in the back. Thank you for your time and sharing your science and your experience with all of us. We hope that the rest of your field work goes super well and the weather stays tolerable.
Perfect day today. Yeah.
Yeah, it does look perfect.
Aw.
Thank, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks so much for inviting us to share what we're doing out here. It's been really fun.
it's been a good day.
All right. To all of our viewers, I really want to thank you for joining us and sharing questions. There are so many ways for you to be engaged with Polar Steam. You can subscribe to this YouTube channel or follow us on social media at Polar Steam Team. To see our blog, educational resources, and program information, check that out on our website. A reminder that a recording of this live stream will be posted on our YouTube channel. We'd also like to invite you to join us for our next two Cool Connections live streams happening next week. Monday on the 22nd and Thursday the 25th, both will be at 10 a.m. Pacific time. Monday, we're heading to South Greenland to join a team that is studying Arctic lakes. And on Thursday, we will be back in Alaska, joining a team that's looking at the carbon cycle as part of a long-term ecological research project. Thank you for tuning into Polar Steam's Cool Connections today, and we hope to see you next week at our next ones. Thank you.